What happened to this young man after his death was shocking, especially considering the fact that he never believed in an afterlife. He believed that no one had returned from there. However, when he was faced with the question of how to get back from there himself, his disbelief instantly disappeared. It all started with the fact that he was supposed to have a simple operation, but for some reason, the anesthesia did not work. There was no way his mind could sink into sleep. Then he heard words that filled his soul with wild fear, making every cell of his body shudder. One of the surgeons said, "Gentlemen, this is a bad business. We need to take urgent measures." The young man raised his head to ask the doctors why he was still conscious and what was wrong with his operation, but did not have time, because he noticed something so strange that at first he did not even understand what scared him so much. However, when he realized what was happening to him, his horror only intensified. Watch this video to the end, and you will find out what happened to him in the afterlife, how he managed to return from there, as well as what happens to the soul in the first moments after death, and how the dead can come into contact with the living. We know the amazing story of a young man who, by the will of fate, visited the other world thanks to the research of Silas Mitchell, an outstanding physician, scientist, and president of the American Association of Physicians, who lived at the beginning of the 20th century. He believed that on the other side of physical existence, there is another space where our souls gain true immortality. Silas Mitchell said, "Examples from my practice give every reason to believe that human existence does not end with the last breath." In his opinion, the thought of death is one of the most frightening for most people, especially when a person realizes that he is taking his last breath. Some are able to cope with the fear of ending their mortal path, while others are not. But there is hardly a person who would not think about what is beyond the horizon of life: emptiness, oblivion, or some other form of existence. Silas Mitchell himself, being a doctor, stood on strict materialistic positions and never believed in an afterlife. Besides, he had a tendency to doubt everything and check everything carefully before making any conclusion. Due to these qualities, he was considered one of the best specialists of his time. However, after one event, his views changed dramatically. It all happened like this. One day, late at night, after a hard day's work, Silas Mitchell was fast asleep when he suddenly heard an insistent ring at the front door of his house. It could only be someone who was in trouble. When he opened the door, he saw a girl on the threshold. Despite the winter frost, she was dressed too lightly, in a simple green dress, and her head was covered with only a gray shawl. Her whole appearance suggested that the stranger came from a poor neighborhood located near the doctor's house. Fearing that she might get sick, he offered to let her in to keep warm, but she refused. She said her mother needed medical attention urgently. Silas realized that it was a matter of life and death, but to his shame, he was in no hurry. He understood that he would not be paid for an urgent night call, and did not want to drag himself into the freezing cold in the poor neighborhoods. However, without even knowing why, he put on his coat and followed her. As he had expected, the girl led him to one of the terrible barracks where the poor lived. She pointed to the room that needed to be entered. There was only a bed in the room with an elderly sick woman whose face expressed an extreme degree of suffering. The doctor came over, examined her, and gave his verdict. It was pneumonia. He wrote the recommendations on a piece of paper, then turned around to hand them to the girl who brought him here. But, surprisingly, she was not there. Silas turned to the sick woman. "Tell me, where is your daughter? I have to give her the recommendations." The woman was surprised and replied, "My daughter died 2 months ago." Silas asked, "Did she have a green dress?" The woman pointed to an old cupboard. When the doctor opened it, he saw the same dress and gray shawl in which the girl appeared to him. And then Silas realized that her soul, which appeared before him in an ethereal shell, had called for his help. After this incident, Silas Mitchell seriously began to study such phenomena, and after years of research, came to the conclusion that communication is difficult between the world in which we live and the one we move into after death. But in some cases, it is possible. This happens either out of a feeling of great love or hatred. To illustrate what happens in the first moments after death, Silas Mitchell cited the story of the young man with whom we started this video. After it became clear to him that there were problems with the operation, his fate took an amazing turn. He turned his head to the side, trying to figure out what had happened. What he saw shocked him. There was another person next to him in the operating room. He looked extremely ill. He was very pale and motionless, and there was a grave chill from him. When the young man looked more closely, he was horrified. It was himself. At the same moment, everything went dark around, and for a while it was pitch black. When he came to his senses again, he was no longer afraid. Instead, he was overcome by a sense of curiosity. He saw the doctors standing around his body, and it became clear from their behavior that they were fighting for his life. This picture filled his soul with sadness and sadness. He had lived so little in this world. Suddenly, he was overcome by longing for his parents, who were far from the place where the operation took place. No sooner had he thought about it than he found himself in the living room of his house. He saw his mother, who was sitting in an armchair and embroidering, and his father was reading a newspaper by a table lamp. The young man tried to talk to his mother, but she did not pay attention to him. He wasn't going to give up. Summoning all his willpower, he tried to send her a message that he was next to her. At first, nothing worked, but after several attempts, his mother raised her head as if sensing something was amiss and looked around. Alarm lit up in her eyes. The worried mother started talking to the father about her son. This filled the young man's soul with pain. He imagined what would happen to his elderly parents when they found out about his death. The feeling of love for his parents awakened in him a fierce thirst for life. At the same moment, something, like a gust of cold wind, picked up his soul, and it flew swiftly through some kind of tunnel, literally crashing back into his body. When everything was over, the patient told about his stay beyond this world, but, of course, no one believed him. Only Silas Mitchell took the trouble to check all the facts and came to the conclusion that somehow the patient's soul was actually able to visit his parents' house. They confirmed all the details that their son, who returned to life, told about. The medic was especially struck by the fact that the soul not only went into the otherworldly space through a tunnel, but also returned back to the body in the same way. Of course, strictly speaking, that patient visited only the first sphere of the afterlife. But his case, like hundreds of others, proves that reality is not limited only to our physical space. This means that the chances that life after death exists are increasing many times. Silas Mitchell said that people should never rush to leave this world, but they should not be afraid of death either. It is important to take care not so much about what will happen to the soul after the cessation of mortal existence, but about what is happening to it now. The mystery of life after death begins here on Earth. You just need to not be afraid to look at the facts honestly and not reject them. There is already a great deal of evidence, and to deny it is just to persist in your stupidity. Write in the comments how you think Silas Mitchell was right when he said that the mystery of life after death begins here on Earth. Dear friends, thank you for watching my video to the end. If you liked it, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's very important. Thank you, and have a nice day.